to the Black Media Matter studios in my
Thank
living
you.
room set.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Hey.
Proud to be here.
Yeah, well, your story really starts as somebody who grew up in the CD, of a lot of ties to so many people here. Tell us a bit about the beginnings of you saying, I'm going to do something different. I'm going to make a shift here and actually go get my skills. And what made you choose electrician?
Well, I was about 19 years old at the time, and I had primarily was just spending my time hanging out on the block, on the streets, and decided at one point that I didn't want to live like that. That I was destined for something better. And it's funny because I actually had always wanted to be a dentist, and but some of the choices that I had made at the time made me feel that I couldn't go that direction. So, I thought, why not, join a trade? And so me and a friend used to hang out at Seattle Vocational Institute. And we used to just, talk to girls and stuff like that and just hang out on the steps, And one day we would just do that every day. And one day, a guy named Bob Markle, I'm not sure if you're familiar with him or not, but really cool guy, started a program, a pre-apprenticeship program. And, he offered us, a position in the class, as a way that we could still talk to the girls, but also learn some skills. So we ended up doing that, me and a friend. And from that point, I was just kind of off to the races. I had they had the Welch Plaza on Jackson that was torn down, and they were building some apartments. So they pulled us out of the class, and I kind of just took off from there.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, well, I've talked to several other guests here about the importance of the trades, really getting our young folks to understand it's such an amazing lifestyle that you can create for yourself. And you really have become an example of that. As you got into the business, tell us a bit about the journey, because we know that there are certain steps you have to go through, right? Certain hours in terms of being on the job before you opened up Rain City Electric. Just tell us a bit about your journey as an electrician on your own.
Well, what's funny is, so that job that we had started at Welch was actually contracted by a contractor outside of the CD, or like the city limits. So because they were bidding the work in a urban neighborhood, they had to hire a certain amount of minorities. So what was crazy is that they pulled a few students out of the class, and I started on that job. The crazy part is, they put me in school. They had to put me in school, but essentially they didn't really have to teach me anything on the job. So the first 2 years I spent just sweeping a broom, and while they were bringing in other guys, teaching them, training them how to run wires. And because I lived in the neighborhood, sometimes I would hop over the fence at night and just like follow the wires to see how the other guys during the day were doing things. But for 2 years I didn't touch a wire at all. And so once that contract was filled by the company, I was laid off. And then around that time, there was no Google or, Yahoo or anything like that to go search for jobs. And, back then it was like the newspaper. So I found a job with a company out in Everett. But by that time, I was a second-year apprentice, and I was in a 4-year program. They, once the job was over, they didn't have to pay for school anymore. So I didn't go to school after that. I took 2 years of school. I excelled in that. But when I got to the second company, I didn't really know too much of anything because I had been pushing a broom the whole time. So I got to this company, and I remember a funny story where I went to a job. I was always really good at selling myself, and talking and stuff like that. So I got the position, and during that time, you got paid based on the tier you were at, or the year you were in as far as your apprenticeship. And so I was a second-year apprentice at the time, and I was supposed to be making a certain amount of money, or based on my expected level of skill, right? So when I got to this company, I really didn't know how to do anything, but I sold myself like I could. They sent me to a job, and I remember stripping a piece of wire with like some pliers or something crazy like that. And then one of the one of the journeymen has seen that and was like, no, that's not how it's done. They sent me back to the office. I talked to him. Was like, yo, they didn't teach me anything, you know. So I took a pay cut, and then from there on out, for the next 2 years, I just learned how to wire houses and stuff like that. And I was always underpaid though. You know, I was always just, you know, I didn't really feel like I was appreciated a lot. But I knew I had a vision. I didn't want to work for a company for the rest of my life. I knew I just wanted to learn the skill, figure out the business part, and then go from there.
Wow.
You
Well,
know?
so you always had this vision then. And honestly, a lot of folks that I've talked to always talk about, you know, you get your bearings, you know, throughout the journey before you become a journeyman or whatever the steps are, right? I always think of journeyman, but there's probably other steps there. But before you get to a certain place where like you kind of max out basically, right? In terms of pay, you know, learn the skills, go on these jobs and learn the skills. But the great thing about the trades is you can always take that skill and create a business out of it. So tell us about the beginnings of Rain City Electric. What had you land on the name? It's a great name, right, for this area. But tell us a bit about the beginnings when you finally got to that point of, all right, I've learned enough in this environment. Now I can take it to another level and become my own business.
Well, the company, when I first started my company, um, the name was Revolt Electric. And I named it Revolt Electric because for the time I had spent learning all the skills that I learned, because I jumped from job to job intentionally so I can learn a full spectrum of the trade, you know. So I did outdoor stuff, indoor stuff, smart homes, you know, all types of things like that. But during this process, um, I went, you know, there was a particular way I was treated, you know, and you know, I don't like throwing the race card in it, but I think it had a lot to do with some things, you know, as far as, you know, my pay scale, you know, how I was treated on the job site, stuff like that. And I just kind of had this not necessarily a rebellious attitude toward it, but you know, I wanted to stand for something, you know. So revolt was kind of like a double entendre, you know. A volt is a measurement of electricity, and you know, revolt was something that revolt. I wasn't necessarily revolting, but I was just kind of like pushing the line for what I believed in, you know. So Revolt Electric was the name, and we did very well. And it was like my second or third year officially in business, and then the BLM thing hit, you know, the stuff with George Floyd, and that name started to cause me problems, you know. It started to cause me problems. Customers started to ask me about the origination of the name, and I started to see just because of the climate of the country, that with that name and then me having that black face, I started to get a little blowback from that. So I changed the name. You know, it was a business decision to change the name, and I chose Rain. You know, because it was a strong, powerful name, and it just stuck from there.
Well, there you have it. I mean, that's a great story. And you're so right in terms of, you know, I could see how that may cause some customers to go, wait a minute, what are you
It did.
revolting against?
It did, because I would find myself at jobs and customers would honestly ask me, you know, like, what's up with the name, you know? And there were some jobs that got, you know, that I didn't win because of the name, you know? So that
Wow.
was important.
Well, I mean, it goes back to, I think, in terms of you actually identifying your customer base, knowing what you need to do in order to take on more jobs. But this is also, you know, an industry where you're oftentimes bidding for work. Tell us a bit about that process, because as you talk about, you know, building it up in the first few years and, you know, doing really well, what does that look like on the back end for you?
Well, there's a few parts to bidding. It's not about just giving the right numbers. I think you have to give, or what I've learned is that you have to give the customer an experience. You know, there's a level of respect that you have to bring to the customer. And for some reason, I've always just been really personable. And so I think, you know, I've learned that the numbers really don't dictate whether you get a job or not, whether they're high or or they're too low or whatever. I think it's a feeling that customers get when they meet you. So, I do a lot of like on the ground work, I'm the first point of contact for the customers. It's like a lot of other companies, when you call their number, you'll get like a receptionist or something like that. And, I model my company a little different where, when the calls come in, they're getting the owner, you know what I mean? And then they get dispatched from there, So, um, from the phone call to the time when I walk in the business or the house, they're getting, what I represent, and then my employees are just an extension of me, you know what I mean? But I bring it to the table first. And 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 so the bidding really, like I said, really isn't the numbers. It's just, I try to provide an experience to the customers, that I treat them like I would my brother or sister, and they trust me, and I think that's a big thing.
Yeah, that says speaks volumes. I mean, I know when I moved into my condo and I had some issues, you were the first one I called because I'm like, look, I know I already trust him. I know him, like he's gonna send some professionals out, and so I'm a customer, y'all. So it's not just that he has an amazing story. I can also vouch for this level of service that you're speaking about, but also too, there's something to be said about the team you build. I mean, if you're building up a business and it starts with you, kind of, solo electrician, how have you been intentional to build a team that also understands the level of service that you are providing for all of your clients and customers?
I think finding the right um, people have a lot to do with passion. Like you got to have people who are not who don't, because you make really good money doing this. Whether you're doing what I'm doing or you're actually out in the field. Some of the guys that we pay make $60 an hour right now. Which is really good money. So just trying to find guys that aren't worried about a paycheck, that care about the business just as much as I do, that pay attention to the small details. They don't, waste material, stuff like that, guys that are presentable, respectful, and you just get an energy when you're around a good person, so I try to find those type of people. I didn't really, there was a time where I was like, profit driven, where I would where I didn't care who I hired. It was just like, if you have the license and you can do the work, you're hired, But I started to get feedback from customers, about, like everything was good at first, and then this guy came and he was just a scumbag, and so reviews are important as well,
Yeah.
and so that's like your reputation, that's what stamps you out here, and to prevent the bad ones and to prevent the bad experiences, I just had to pick the right guys, and these guys, the guys that I have right now are just as loyal, just as passionate, just as driven as I am, and they're really loyal,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. That says a lot too, because you're absolutely right. I think there's also this layer of competitiveness in your industry in terms of like, oh, well, what is the next leg for me in terms of me building my skill sets? I mean, you even talked about you early on, going from job to job because you were really looking to, experience all the facets of the business and the trade, and that really helped you as a business owner, right, to be able to bring all of those skills to your team and to your clients. But when you think about ways of growing and you think about the next 4 or 5 years, tell us what is on the horizon for Rain City Electric.
Well, I'm always trying to stay ahead. I think the key to have an edge is information and just knowing about the industry. So, I subscribe to a lot of channels on YouTube, magazines, stuff like that. Just trying to get ahead, like the EV chargers and the smart cars and solar and stuff like that is going to be a real huge wave very soon. And so, just trying to stay ahead of uh, the technology, or not stay ahead, but keep up with it, And a lot of guys are set in their ways, they just want to, wire lights and bend pipe and stuff like that. But there's so many different genres in this field, and I think to be the most successful, it's not. I think you know you need to find a niche, right? But you also have to understand the industry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, kudos to you for being so intentional of, being abreast of all of the different waves that are coming through. And it's so important for us, especially now. There's so many things that are coming through for all of us. There's new technology and there's new trends and there's all these things that we have to keep track of and really stay on top of. So great to hear that you're doing that. Lastly, I got to ask you about staying connected to community. I know oftentimes there are so many opportunities to share your story with other young folks who are like, man, is the trades an option for me? Maybe they don't see the 4-year college route and they want to learn a little bit more. Do you find that that's also important to you in terms of sharing what you've built so that others who may see themselves in you can also see this as a pathway for them?
Can you say this question again?
Yeah. How important is it for you to stay connected to the next generation of folks who may be asking themselves, is the trades for them? Is this a pathway for me? Right? I think me in my community perspective, I'm always thinking, well, you were just like them. You just said it. You were at SVI, you were just, kind of on the streets, and then you had these opportunities, but you took advantage of the opportunities, right? I think a lot of folks sometimes let opportunities go by them, like, oh, I don't need to take advantage of that right now. Like it'll come later. And then you never know what later brings, right? So I just wonder how you envision yourself being able to share your story and share your journey so that others can really see themselves in it.
Yeah, well, like I said, I didn't expect to take this path. It was something that I had to choose because I really couldn't do anything else. I had a record at the time, and I felt like this was the best direction to go. When I had the opportunity to pick a trade, I wanted to, I wanted to make the most money. So I picked a trade that I felt, for one, I didn't want to, swing hammers or chase, piss down a toilet,
Yeah.
For a lack of a better term. But, I wanted to be clean and I thought that that was just the best thing for me to do at that time. Um, I feel like, learning a skill is really important. Me but me pushing a skill on somebody, I don't really try to do that. Like it's just, I think everyone should follow their own path. I do feel like the trades are important, and it's, from what I understand, the original 4-year degree. It's something that there's a difference between a trade like this and maybe something more specialized. Like I can take what I do anywhere in the world. I
Yeah.
can take it to Africa. I can take it to Miami. And I can get paid roughly the same amount, and make the same amount of money as I can here. So I just seen all the variables and all the positives in making the decision to do this. And so I would say, to a young person not really knowing what they want to do, because there is a time after high school where kids are just kind of like confused, like, and they don't know what they want to do. And I would say, if you were to get into the trades, I would look into each one of them and then find things that are relative to you, and then go from there.
That's a great word of advice from somebody who has done it himself. Of course, I got to give you time. Look right there in the camera. If folks are looking for a solid electrician, if they are trying to connect with you in Rain City Electric, let them know right there how they do that.
You can find me at www.raincityelectricwa.com. That's REIGNCITY electricwa.com.
Right on. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was
Thank
great
you.
to have you.
Thanks.
Y'all, I get to wrap.